Hello, friends. I greet you in the name of the Lord. I want to share with you something about mercy. Mercy, but a word straight from the scriptures. During these weeks of global lockdown, we all feel like we've been on a long journey. It's as if we're commuting in the same bus, and hopefully we all speak to each other and say, we hope we're getting to the last bus stop where we're going to get off and this virus will be overcome. But there are people who are commuting alone. And I invite you not to do that. Don't travel alone. If you can possibly help it, don't travel alone. Especially travel with the Lord. So let's commute with the Lord for a little. In this journey, there are a lot of good and beautiful things that are starting to happen, and I'm sure you've noticed many of them. A lot of media is becoming encouraging and contains heartwarming stories about the responses that are being made to people in need. People in desperate circumstances, people who don't know where to turn at this time, people whose resources have run out. And these are stories of kindness and generosity and contain human mercy. And they make me think of that beautiful beatitude in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5 and verse 7, where Jesus says simply, Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. I want to explore the true nature of that mercy with you for a few moments. Now, throughout the Gospel, Jesus expounds the theme of mercy through his teachings in sayings and parables. And they are, in fact, expositions of the great commandment, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But I think Jesus teaches a picture of mercy that is much deeper and beyond our own human definitions of mercy. And we have many of them. And I'm going to share a few of those with you. But Jesus' meaning of mercy is profound in its simplicity. Its simplicity makes it so profound. What motivates you to acts of mercy? I remind you that in literature, great authors have filled stages and books around the theme of mercy. Some of you might recall from your school days William Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice. And in that play, the greatest speech is delivered in a court of law by the lawyer Portia. She is defending Antonio and Shylock, the greedy Jew, has drawn up a contract. And he has made money available and so on, etc. And Antonio cannot repay the debt. And the contract says, if you can't pay, I'm going to take out a pound of flesh just below your heart. And we're going to cut it out with a dagger. So Portia begins the defense and so on, etc. But the contract stands. She has no legal argument. She's got no legal defense. The contract is watertight. And so she resorts to pleading with Shylock to be merciful. Here's a portion of her speech. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute of awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the heart of kings. It is an attribute of God himself, and earthly power then show likest God, when mercy seasons justice. Great line, when mercy seasons justice. How often does mercy not season justice? You see, Shylock has the power. He has the power to bypass law. He can tear up the contract because he has the power over someone's life and death. Mercy can happen if Shylock does not claim what is lawfully his. Now, perhaps Shakespeare's picture is based on one of the parables of Jesus, but you can decide on that. But the point here is that mercy is driven by power. One can't help thinking about Pontius Pilate, can you? Pontius Pilate, who had the same power over Jesus in the moment when he himself admitted, I find no fault in this man. He could have exercised mercy over law. We often think of mercy in this way. Mercy is the result of withholding power that I can exercise, power that can crush and hurt, power that can exact the pound of flesh. Is this what motivates your acts of mercy? Now, what about doing the human thing? Or perhaps what we call humanism. Does this not call us to a higher form of mercy? A good example of this kind of philosophy is a piece of African philosophy that's important to us in South Africa. It's called Ubuntu. And here's the definition. Ubuntu can be described as an African philosophy that places emphasis on being self through others. It is a form of humanism which can be expressed in the phrase, I am because of who we all are. Who we all are. Ubuntu. Ungumuntu Abantu in the Zulu language. Now, that is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing, and it is a meaningful description of our relationship, how it should be with our neighbors. And at its heart it says, I have meaning because I exist, you see, in the context of my fellow man. And it can be a message from Africa to the global village. If I do acts of mercy, it's because my identity is shaped through the corporate identity. It is an identity through the collective. And it's very akin to the idea of the family of man. But I ask this, is your identity purely dependent on the fact that you're a member of the society? Are there not other contributions to understanding your identity? Is it not true that you and I also have a personal spirituality? I think it will only be a small step to say, I do acts of mercy because I want to have a meaningful identity, or I want to be known even as a good member of the human race. That's not the Jesus picture. It's not deep enough. Jesus is going to take us further than this. In fact, Jesus takes us even further than some religious thinking. Thinking in religion that prescribes how and when you're expected to be merciful. In other words, prescriptive mercy. Let's take a close look at a very important parable. Now, there's no doubt that the scribes and Pharisees were religious leaders that had power over the common people. They paraded themselves as examples of righteousness and despised the common man as being unclean and outside God's grace, beyond grace. And when you tell people over and over again that they are worthless, eventually it may become true. The Samaritans were treated like this. Jesus comes with a message and uses the Samaritans as a pivot to heal that abuse. He attacks the pride of those who claim personal righteousness, and he teaches the need for humility, a humility that asks for mercy. He tells the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector who go to the temple to pray. The Pharisee says something like this: "Oh, dear God, I thank you that I'm okay and I'm not like this miserable tax collector." The tax collector, who was despised by everyone as a servant of the Roman overlords, prays like this: "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Doesn't even look to heaven. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Now it's clear to me that what Jesus is addressing is the self-exaltation of those in power. And in Luke 18:14, Jesus warns against it. He says, "Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." Now, some of you may recall, many, many years ago, there was a song called Little Boxes. I can't even remember how long ago, but it was a long, long time ago. Little Boxes. It's all about how we label each other and put each other in little boxes. And you know, and I know, that even under the umbrella of religion, we can do that. We can degrade, we can humiliate, we can dehumanize our neighbor. We box them in a social status that makes them absolutely helpless. And that's what happened to the Samaritans. That is a picture that is totally and absolutely devoid of mercy. Devoid of mercy. If we do acts of mercy simply because we think we are righteous, or we think we know what righteousness is, then we've missed the Jesus boat. And I think Jesus' definition is going to take us even beyond our best understanding of social ethics. Social ethics evolve in a sense. And we try and improve them all the time. But when Jesus taught the ethics of God's kingdom, you see, he addressed both the ethics of the Jews and the Romans of his time, all the society around him. And the Jews and the Romans had something in common with each other, as far as this was concerned. And it's this: if Jesus said to both of those societies, "Blessed are the merciful," both the Romans and the Jews would have replied, You're wrong, Jesus. It should be blessed, not blessed are the merciful, but blessed are the powerful. It seems to me that the history of ethics in society is born out of what I would call 4 R's. 4 R's that shape the desire to have a good ethic. 4 R's for me are rebellion, reformation, revolution, and renaissance. These movements are spearheaded by a caravan of people. They were and are warlords, freedom fighters, moral champions, monks, artists. It was not long ago that some of the champions were motivated to be merciful. Only yesterday was the abolition of slavery. And you will know, and I'm sure you understand and you comprehend, that where slavery still exists in our world, in societies, certain societies, those societies are still barbaric. Because a slave has no human rights. Things like kindness and generosity and dignity is given to the slave only by those who have the power to give it, and if they are so disposed. Talking about slavery, I think of the example of Anna and Christian. Anna and Christian fell in love. They had children, but they could not marry. The reason was that Christian was employed as a soldier in the Dutch East India Company, and by law he was not able to marry Anna because Anna was a slave. She and her children had the same non-legal status as furniture and cattle. And furniture and cattle and a thing cannot enter into a legal contract and be a beneficiary of your estate. And also, the church at the Cape at the time could not marry you unless you were baptized. So, what happened? And here's the beautiful story. Christian then pays the Dutch East India Company 40 riksdaler, and by legal receipt buys the freedom of Anna and of her children. She is baptized in the Dutch Reformed Church, and they get married. Now, Anna was born in Bengal. She was a Malay slave. How do I know her story? Because her daughter, Anna Johanna, is my 7 generations removed great-grandmother. I love Anna. I love her because her story says, love is merciful. Mercy is born out of love, and mercy delivered her and delivered me from bondage. But now Jesus takes us to that deep place, to a simpler and more profound understanding of what is merciful. And here it is. In Matthew's Gospel, there are 2 men in Matthew 18 who had power in their hands to show mercy. To modernize the parable, let me call them Jack and Paul. Okay? I hope you don't mind, Jack. I'm Paul. Jack lent Paul 10,000. When Paul could not pay, Jack wrote off the debt. Now that's using the power for mercy, his power for mercy. Paul then goes to Sam, who owes him 100. Sam can't pay, and Paul throws him into prison and wipes out his family. That's using power to be merciless. On the face of it, the parable is about a man who had a debt, and the merciful thing was to wipe off the debt. Not so. Not so. The deep thing here in the parable is that mercy is not about being kind by writing off the debt. It is about lifting somebody who is totally and utterly helpless. Yes, it's true. He didn't have the money to pay the debt. But that's not the motivation for mercy. Mercy is driven in the purest form when we face the helplessness of a fellow person, a fellow traveler. It's interesting that that word mercy in the Greek can be related to another word which means to have compassion. And I think mercy and compassion holds hands. They're interchangeable words. Jesus strengthens this in the picture of the Good Samaritan, for example. It took a Samaritan who was despised and impure to help a wounded traveler. And what is wonderful about the story is that the Samaritan didn't do it to improve his self-image. He didn't do it because he had power. He didn't do it because he was going to receive any reward or recognition. He didn't do it to improve himself in any way. He didn't do it because it was prescribed by his religion. He did it simply because he found a traveler at the roadside sleeping under the bush at night, or the traveler hiding behind the post office building at night, sleeping in a cardboard box, without income, without bread, without whatever, but totally helpless. Totally helpless. St. Paul says it in Romans 5. Hear these beautiful words. While we were still helpless, Christ died for the wicked at the time that God chose. It is a difficult thing for someone to die for a righteous person. It may even be that someone might dare die for a good person. But God has shown us how much He loves us. It was while we were still sinners that Christ died for us, while we were helpless. Jesus taught nothing that He Himself did not fulfill. He is the Prince of Mercy. He comes to us when we can do nothing about our human dilemma. We can do nothing about the vortex of human sin. It is our helplessness that He meets with mercy. And so we're called to be merciful, not by our own design, but for the Jesus reason. Doing mercy the Jesus way. Not because we have power, not because we are better than someone else, not because we seek reward, not because it's prescribed by denomination or religious persuasion, but because somebody out there is helpless. And you are going to do it without any accolade. And you're going to do it in the name of the Prince of Mercy and his name is Jesus. My dear friend, thank you for listening. May his grace be with you now. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.